Well, good morning, and it's Mike Dotterer, and we're champions on the dot. And I just want to say it's a beautiful morning here in the central part of the United States. If you're on the eastern part, I know it's getting cold up there in the northeast region. They've gotten a lot of snow, and on the west coast, hopefully you're done with all that rain that came last week. So again, we have a great show for you. And before I get into the show, I want to thank some of the people that have helped make Champions on the Dot what it is today. And the first person I want to thank is Brian Holloway. And I want to shout out to Brian. We did a Champions on the Dot Super Bowl weekend. And if you're interested in learning more about Brian, I'm putting his little website down below. Brian and I were teammates at Stanford University back in the late 70s, early 80s. And he went on to an illustrious career with the New England Patriots. He was an all-pro, all-decade team with the Patriots. He led the Patriots to their first Super Bowl, kind of paved the way for Tom Brady. And then now he's very active with the University of Central Florida, and working with Dr. Richard Lapchick, who is an amazing man, helped Nelson Mandela when Nelson was imprisoned in South Africa. And he's doing great things at the University of Central Florida. So thanks to Brian. And also want to thank my good friend, John David Rainbolt. And John David Rainbolt is we were students at Stanford, and he came up with this formulation called Anesthesia, and it's truly amazing. For all of you old football players that have aches and pains, you can go to the website right there, To Be Kind. This has been a godsend for me. And John David Rainbolt's the formulator and founder of To Be Kind, and he's a genius when it comes to biochemistry, and he's a Stanford graduate. And then I want to thank the Players NIL. The Players NIL actually is an organization that helps young student athletes. NIL stands for Name, Image, and Likeness, and it's something that I wish I had, or we had, back in the day, but now student athletes have that, and our guests might talk about NIL and how it's how it's helping athletes all across the country. And you can go to theplayersnil.com for more information. Great organization to help student athletes. And then also I want to thank my good friend Jim Grunberg, and Jim has a company called Seymour Putters, and Payne Stewart used the Seymour putter to win the U.S. Open back in 1999. And thank you, Jim, for helping out and helping make Champions on the Dot what it is today. Now I put my Stanford hat back on, and I think that's about it. So we're ready for prime time. I am so excited about today's Champions on the Dot, because I'm going to bring up a man who I met, I believe, about a year ago, because I'm interested. I'm a former college football player, and there's so many things that I wish we had back in the day, and now it's coming to fruition. And I'm so happy that our guest today, Jason Stahl, who is the executive director for the College Football Players Association. And the time is now. I hope all my Stanford alumni and that played, teammates and players that I've watched through the years, I hope they join the College Football Players Association. And if you want to go to that website, I'm going to put that up right now. And there it is, the College Football Players Association. You can go there and learn more about it. But let me just give you a little background on Jason. Jason was a professor at the University of Minnesota, which I have a warm spot in my heart, because I used to live in Edina, Minnesota back in the day, and used to play wiffle ball in the backyard in Edina. And it's a great school, the Golden Gophers. And he was a professor. I'll read you just a little bit about his amazing career. He because of the department that he was in, was organizational leadership policy, and he started to teach some of the student athletes and especially the football players, and started to realize how difficult it is to study and also play football, which thanks to Dartmouth College, and he'll probably talk about this, the Dartmouth College basketball team is just got a ruling last week with the National Labor Relations Bureau board to designate college athletes, college basketball players, as employees, because it is a job. And so I'm sure Jason's going to talk about that. But in any event, he realized how difficult it was to be a football player, a college student athlete football player, and he decided to dive in, and he can go into more details. But I'm just so grateful for him, and I'm a member of the College Football Players Association. So without further ado, I want to bring on Jason Stahl. Jason, welcome to Champions on the Dot.
Thanks for that great introduction, Mike. It's so great to be here. You said a year. I bet you it's been more like a year and a half now. You and I have been talking, and it's just a real pleasure to see you in person virtually here and talk to your audience.
Well, thank you for coming on, Jason. And I just, I know there's so much more you'd like to talk about. I mean, maybe you could give a little more background about why you started the College Football Players Association, and where you've been, where you are today, and what you see for the future.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you did a good, sort of short take on what the experience was like for me as a professor who basically, I think a lot of people understand how universities work, particularly for football college athletes, is that they're tracked into certain majors. They don't get the full value of their scholarship, I would really argue, and I think a lot of people do. And for me, I encountered these guys and they sort of just interested me. They're from all over the country. They had fantastic stories. And I sort of had a vague idea that I was going to write a second book on these guys and their lives, sort of the true lives of college football players that people didn't understand. And then, of course, I would bring the kind of faculty perspective to this in terms of how and why I interfaced with them and so forth. This took a very different turn than I had thought. I ended up being an advocate for these players internally, doing, full compliance reporting and so on for significant problems that I saw on the team. This then, I believe, led to my demotion and a subsequent resignation from Minnesota and striking out on this new path this summer of 2020. I had a vague idea. I wanted to get into athlete advocacy, start writing about the things that I knew. And at the same time, college football players were organizing nationwide, really, I would argue for the first time in the midst of COVID. They were being asked to return to campus. Many of them wanted to, many of them didn't. But it was very clear at that point that they were the essential workers of college athletics, that without their work on the field, these athletic departments were going to be in dire straits. And so I think it was then that we really understood their centrality to the system and its functioning. Some of the players then at that time made this call for the creation of a College Football Players Association to advocate on their behalf, to organize through, right, to create some sort of functioning players association to represent their collective voice. I, at the time, summer of 2020, said, this is a great idea. I didn't think I was going to be the person to do it, but I did very soon after, maybe a month later, realize, boy, this is going to go down the memory hole if somebody doesn't give this a go. And so then for like a year, summer 2020 to summer 2021, I wrote about it at my newsletter. How would it work? My own research is in political history, is in institution building. And so I thought, well, I could sort of outline how I think this thing would work and how it might be successful. And then I thought, well, if somebody steals the idea from me, so be it, especially if it was a group of former players. But by the summer of 21, I realized, like, if I don't do it, nobody's going to do it. And so I had a core group of advisors at the time, including some former players, and launched the thing. And so here we are nearly 3 years later. What we're trying to do with the College Football Players Association, I think, is two-pronged. Prong number one is organize past, present, and future players into a single institution. And Mike, that's how you got involved as a alumni member. We think alum are key to building this thing. They get us entrance points into current players and current programs. They also help us sustain the institution through grassroots fundraising, $50 a year to be an alumni member. And so that's the first prong. But then the second prong is get into those current programs and really try to build towards collective bargaining for the current players. So we're engaged basically in those two prongs right now. That's how you came into my orbit. Is a year and a half ago, you reached out and said, well, I used to play at Stanford, had an NFL career, I'd love to get involved. And you and I have been talking ever since, because I think you're the key. The former players are the key to really sustaining and undergirding the institution.
Well, thank you, Dr. Stahl, Professor Stahl. I feel like I'm back in class, and I'm sitting in the auditorium listening to you, and we're broadcasting live on YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, Twitch, and hopefully this is going out to quite a few people. We might have some questions. You can ask questions in the comment section. So if anyone has any questions, please type in. But I got to ask you about the ruling last week with Dartmouth basketball. How's that going to help us with building our College Football Players Association?
Yeah, so I think the Dartmouth ruling, I want to, big shout out to the Dartmouth men's basketball players. They were the first here as a team to stand up and say collectively, we want to try to chart a new path, right? We want to unionize our team. I think it caught everybody off guard, because when we think of sort of college athletics or big time college athletics, we don't think of Dartmouth basketball. But the case the players were making is, effectively, we are employees. The employee test that the National Labor Relations Board, the NLRB, uses centers around the issue of control. How much control do the institutions have over the players' lives? And then that dictates whether or not they are an employee. The NLRB, General Counsel, and others have been arguing for quite a while that college athletes are employees. We had not been participating in those debates. We had effectively said, we're trying to organize past, present, and future players towards various futures that they might want. Now, we were always open to membership current players who suggested they would want to unionize, right? They would want to go that kind of official NLRB path or official union drive and election path. We're obviously going to still be open to that sort of thing. And so we think, yes, of course, kudos to the Dartmouth men's basketball players who filed for their election. The recent ruling said they are, this week and a half ago, maybe 2 weeks ago, said they are employees. A date for the union election in early March has been set. The players will vote. The institutions will undoubtedly appeal and try to sort of go through the processes of the NLRB and then undoubtedly the federal courts to try to get that overturned. But I think the train is running down the tracks here. And even if the Dartmouth case is ultimately not successful, the players still have to vote for their union. It still has to go through a different appeals process at the NLRB and the federal courts. There's another ongoing NLRB case that's much more narrow, I would argue, out in California. NLRB is arguing on behalf of college USC football players and men's and women's basketball players. So in that case, it's a much more narrow band of college athletes that are being targeted at the highest level of play. I think the case that those athletes are employees is a no-brainer at this point. The institution exercises near total control over their work lives. They are employees. I think that case is, I would argue, has a more chance of success in the long term, much higher chance of success. And so we'll watch as these two paths head forward. And then, of course, we'll stay focused, though, these things are going to happen outside of our control. What is under our control is organizing past, present, and future players. And so right now, we're building our alumni network like you, Mike, but then also we are, hard and fast in several schools, current players organizing them. And yeah, hopefully we'll be able to make some news and big breakthrough 2024 for us.
Yeah, it's very exciting. And I think, Jason, you look at, you have current players that are actively playing. Actually, you have future players. I hope that high school players are going to watch this and can someone in high school join the college players?
Yeah. Let me explain the membership structure. So, at the beginning, the hardest challenge, you got to understand, like I really started writing about this in summer of 2020. I mean, this is before the Alston case. This is before players had access to their name, image, and likeness rights. This is before, these debates over employee status, before all of this. I'm writing at a time where we don't really know where the future is going to go. So I tried to develop an institution that could speak to any and all emergent futures in college athletics and college football in particular. So we developed 4 membership categories. Alumni, let me start. We'll go current player member, high school member. Both of those memberships, they're free. We want guys to sign up. We want guys to get in the system and help us start organizing. So if you're a high school player or you're a current college football player, we really want you to head over to our website and sign up for sure, right? Free membership. We've developed a membership structure, which we think we can keep dues for current players and certainly high school players at 0 because their playing careers are so short, Mike. I mean, you know this. And we don't think it's fair to try to sort of, take dues to them, right? When we think we've got this massive category of former players out there, some of whom have been successful, others of whom would be inclined to support us if they knew about us, in terms of our last 2 membership categories, alumni member and lifetime member. So right now, alumni member is the category you're in, Mike, of course. And that's the category we're thinking grassroots fundraising, right? $50 a year, but then also help us build this thing. Because long term, Mike, I mean, the vision here is like, wow, in 5 years, what if we had a national convention and you had past, present, and future players show up by the tens of thousands? I think that is absolutely doable. You create a network of past, present, and future players that I think any player would want to be a part of. I know you want to be a part of it, right? I know other players want to be a part of it. And then our final category, lifetime member, that's for former players who have been, let's just say, extraordinarily successful, right? And they really want to help us support the financial, our financial needs at the institution. And so, yeah, that basically is the membership structure. And we think it feeds these 2 pathways that we're organizing on now with former players and with current players.
Well, thank you. I love listening to you, Professor Stahl. So I just want to also let everyone know, whether you're in high school, you're playing high school American football, or you're playing college American football, or you're alumni, that we do wield power. And I know this, and this, Professor Stahl, about the story about the University of Missouri, that Spike Lee did a documentary.
Yeah.
And I don't think a lot of, when you're younger, you're in high school or you're in college, you don't realize how much power and influence you have on a university. And could you share a little bit of what the University of Missouri did?
Yeah, boy, that it's so funny. I think people forget about Missouri, Mike. I was in a conversation with someone yesterday. They brought up Missouri, and I was like, yeah, we need to talk about that more, because Missouri was an institution. Mike, can you remind me the year? Was it 2018? Do you remember?
I think you're right. I think it was 2018, but let me check it. You can start talking and I'll look it up.
Yeah, I believe it's 2018, where there was, activism on campus and organizing around campus around issues of racial justice that students, non-athlete students, were organizing. I do urge folks, I have not seen that documentary. I've only read about, the happenings in Missouri during that year. But it was outside of the football team that the organizing started, where Black students were effectively organizing around issues of racial justice on their campus, specific to incidents that happen on campus, if I'm remembering this correctly, also the history of the institution as well. And it was building through the fall. And then, yeah, it came to the point where football players jumped on board the organizing efforts. And I think showed at that point the real power of college athletes and college football players specifically when they organize in mass. Because I think I always try to make the difference between activism and organizing. And I think activism's good, it's necessary. I think we associate it with social media, we associate it with sort of speaking out. These are all good things, obviously. But I think it can sometimes be hyper individualized, where individual voices sort of come up much stronger than collective voices. And I think what you saw at Missouri was the collective voice of the Black students, but then also specifically the football players, who I think provided a tipping point for the resignation of the president at the University of Missouri. Thus, I think, as you're alluding to, Mike, showing the real power of football college athletes when they organize in mass, right? So it's not these kind of one-off voices, but rather a collective. And that is obviously what we're trying to do, right? To provide that collective voice, past, present, future players through a single institution.
Yeah, it was, I just looked it up. It was 2016.
16, gosh, yeah.
And I just remember, it was during the football season. Yep. And Spike Lee went down there, did a little documentary. I think it's on 30 for 30. So if you have ESPN, you can look up, there's a 30 for 30 piece. And they were trying to, say, as you mentioned, there was racial, issues going on. And they felt that the president wasn't, it was like, if you look at a college like a corporation, and the president's the CEO. Well, the shareholders said, we want a new, CEO, and the students brought it to the football team, and the football team said, we agree with you. And they basically said, the football team said, well, we're not going to play this coming Saturday.
That's right.
And the next day, the president was gone.
Yep. I mean, it goes back to the CEO thing. Yeah, I mean, I think that what we're starting to see here is people are starting to wise up to the universities as so-called nonprofits. I mean, the universities have massive untaxed endowments. Many of them are essentially hedge funds with educational opportunities attached to them at this point. They are businesses. They, in some cases, are multi-billion-dollar businesses, right? And so we see the same thing with the COVID organizing that we see down at Missouri. Who are the essential workers of college athletics? It's not the university presidents. It's not the athletic directors. It's not even the coaches. I mean, I'm not going to tell you coaches don't work. They work, but they're not the essential workers. We see who the essential workers are when it comes to the Missouri situation, or when it comes to the organizing during COVID. And that is what we're trying to do, but in a sustained way, Mike. I think that's the real difference. Is what always bothered me is any good political movement. You take the civil rights movement, for instance, right? It has elites, it's got judges, and it's got lawyers, and it's got lawmakers, and, leaders who sort of, try to move things in a positive, change-oriented direction, using elite levels of power. But then it also has a grassroots, a sustained grassroots that is organized through existing institutions, right? That's what we see. That's how you get real change in American history. You look at the 1930s, you look at the 1960s, civil rights movement, you look at union movements in the 1930s. Those are some of the most leaps forward I think you could see in terms of positive change in American history. And they did it because they had an organized grassroots through institutions and elites who were interested in creating positive change. That is what we're trying to do. We're trying to organize the grassroots to create real, meaningful change. You get the players organized in an institution that is here to stick around, as we are. That's how you create real change, because you want to take those situations like Missouri or the COVID organizing and not have them seem like just flash in the pans, right? You want to be able to sustain them. And the only way you can do that is through an existing institution like ours.
Well, that's what we're doing here this morning, Jason. And I would like to just say, I hope that if someone's listening or they'll watch this recording, if they care about college football players, send it out to your friends. If you are a high school player or a college player or alumni of college football, we encourage you to join because it's something that's really needed. And we haven't touched much about the health care issue, but I do. Maybe you want to mention, that's one of the thoughts that I had. Going to Stanford, where we have a medical school, and you're playing a sport that we now know, can be injurious to your health, through CTE and traumatic brain injury. And I just didn't understand why great universities that have great medical school on campus, why they wouldn't reach out to the football players and say, hey, you come here and play football at University of Michigan. If you have any issues, you have healthcare. And if we were organized, I think that would happen right away.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. And I think I'm really glad, you brought that up. You and I obviously privately have talked a lot about this issue. And I think one of the things that drew you to the institution, I remember on our first calls together, was the fact that we got a 7-point platform, and we developed that platform over the course of a year with input directly from primarily alumni members like yours or like yourself. And our first 3 planks, health and safety planks, right? I mean, then we developed 4 more planks after that. 2 of those speak directly to health and safety. So we've got 5 of our 7 planks speak directly to the health, safety, and welfare of college football players, current and past. Because of course, Mike, I don't need to tell you, I talk with former players all the time. It doesn't matter their age. It could be 25, 35, all the way up 65, 75. And Mike, you know what I'm going to say? They're still suffering from their playing days injuries, right? And I think that, there's degrees, obviously, of suffering, but I do think everybody's got a story. Everybody's got something they still feel from their playing days, even if they didn't go on to the NFL as you did, right? And so I think that we want to be able to think about that. So for current players, primarily, we're thinking about how do we get second opinions? How do we get, it's very easy actually, because most of these guys are on their parents' health insurance. All they need is an advocate there to say, okay, we're getting an MRI right away in-house, and then we're going to take you to an outside provider and we're going to get you a second opinion. But that never happens, Mike. And so what ends up happening is injuries aren't correctly diagnosed. And then the problem gets exacerbated. So then 3 years later, it's like, oh, here comes the surgery. And then maybe the surgery doesn't take. And so that's how we're thinking about current players. Also, current players, we want to make practices safer. As we've seen in the NFL, through collective bargaining agreements with the NFLPA, making practices safer. There's just way too many practice-related injuries happening right now because you have too many padded practices. You have spring ball that's out of control. You've got fall camp that's out of control. And it needs to be reined in. And the game's not going to suffer. I mean, we see that in the NFL. 123 million people watch the Super Bowl. I mean, but players are safer than they used to be. Also, one of our other platform planks, a real offseason. Right now, I've got players telling me, current players, that their offseason is roughly 2 weeks. That's unacceptable, right? I mean, we need to get more to that NFL standard of making sure that players have a couple of months to do whatever they want, be with family, be with friends, whatever they want, right? And then finally, former players, making sure there is a base level standard for how much time they're getting that medical support that they need after their playing days are done, right? And then hopefully through the institution itself, long term, once we have more success, being able to provide some of that care ourselves as we build our membership base. Because as we grow our membership base, there are things that are possible that are completely independent, let's say, of a collective bargaining agreement or having to negotiate with universities or conferences or bowl games or whatever, right? So, yeah, I mean, that's how I got started in this, Mike, health and safety concerns. That is still where my passion lies. I mean, there's all sorts of things we don't like to talk about. We don't like to talk about the 30 plus players have died playing the game in college football in the 21st century. All of those, with the exception of one, occurred during practice. Nobody likes to talk about this, but we've got, I mean, this is the stuff that really, I think, is right up there with monetary concerns in terms of things we need to be paying attention to.
Well, I can just tell you, I've been involved with my alma mater since 1979, and there's teammates of mine that are no longer here that suffered, traumatic brain injury. And my alma mater, I just remember they don't want to talk about it either. So that's why there's such a need for players to come together to have a collective voice. I mean, it really is, especially for the health issues.
Yep, that's it. And I mean, I think that you hit the nail on the head here. It's very, let's just say, strange that we have these universities. Take Stanford. I mean, I don't know what Stanford's endowment is, right? billion plus, it's got to be. Network of hospitals and clinics that are probably world renowned, right? Place like Stanford. Why can't players have access to those for playing days injuries? For the injuries that they sustained during their playing days? Why can't they have access to those institutions for second opinions when they're current players? It seems like an absolute no-brainer, a total no-brainer, right?
Well, universities, there was a fellow named Thorstein Veblen that wrote many years ago, back in the early 20th century. He was a professor at Stanford and also a professor at University of California, Berkeley. And he, by the way, he graduated from Carleton College in Minnesota.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And the politics in higher education, universities, is fierce. And we live in the most litigious society in the world.
Yeah.
And these universities, they probably say, well, we can't do this because it's going to open us up to litigation.
Yeah, it's interesting because I just think it's one of those things which I get, and that's where a collective bargaining agreement can help, right? To make sure that, yeah, there's not going to be that threat of litigation. I mean, that's what a CBA can do. I do think, though, referencing as you did the politics of universities, I think we debate the politics of universities in American political culture all the time, right? They're embroiled in these sort of cultural debates about woke universities or this, these types of things. I think what's striking to me here is talking about these issues where you're drilling down to the material substance of how students are being treated, in this case, college football players. And you have universities which I think like to set themselves up as sort of exemplars of social justice and social justice politics, when the exploitation that is occurring here among college athletes and college football players in particular is striking. And the fact that those two things can be occurring side by side and not have it produce a type of cognitive dissonance among people who are inclined to support universities is, I think, very striking to me. I think that they do like to sort of set themselves up as sort of having the correct politics when it comes to social justice issues or racial justice issues, despite the fact that they have a political economy around college football players that is the most exploitative labor regime in the United States today, I would argue. And so that's really what we want to highlight for folks and point out that contradiction, and make sure that players understand it as we know they do.
Well, I just want to, what we do on Champions on the Dot, you get the last word. So, I'm going to let you have the last message that you can send out to all those that are listening. But before I hand it over to you, I want to give a shout out to Eleanor Grunberg, who I know wants to be an ambassador for the College Football Players Association.
Oh, yes.
At the University of Tennessee. Of Tennessee.
I had a great talk with Eleanor.
And what do you think about every university? You could have someone like Eleanor. You've got Eleanor there at the University of Tennessee. Every university could have someone like an Eleanor Grunberg, champion this amazing growing organization.
Yeah, that's how it happens, Mike, is, just the grassroots, right? And that's not just former players or current players. It's people like Eleanor I talk to all the time. Like, how do you want to help? And then I don't want to give away our conversation, but, as over the course of our conversation, she's a lawyer in training, right? And very clear ideas. Yeah, here's how you can help. And so everybody, we got a volunteer portal at our website too. And so if you have no relation to the game, but you want to get involved with what we're doing, Definitely, right? We run ourselves too much more like a traditional nonprofit. And so think of us like a campaign, almost like a presidential campaign. Like we need to marshal basically everybody who wants to help out, right? So let's say you're not a past, present, or future player, so you can't become a member. Head over our website, hit the volunteer button, head over our website, hit the donate button. We are not a union in a traditional sense, right? We're a labor organization, but we run ourselves more like a traditional nonprofit in terms of we do traditional fundraising. We try to create that network of past, present, future players, right? And so it's really about everyone getting involved. Yeah, that might be a good last word, Mike.
There you go. That's the great way. Last word. And finally, you have a Substack that I'm going to put up there. People can read about your thoughts on, the growth and the future of the College Football Players Association. It's right down there, your Substack. And then if people want to reach out to you, here's your email address. And
where are we at?
You see that's your email address.
There we go. Yep, that's me.
And then finally, we've got the link to the website. So again, that was a great last word. But I do think, if you could just give one and then I'll turn off the end the stream. But again, this is so critical for college football players that this gets out there. And I would love to see this go viral. I really would. And it's not for me. I mean, I'm just grateful that I woke up this morning and the sun came up, because a lot of my friends, I mean, I can list players that are no longer with us that I played with. And I'm doing this for them and for future generations. So again, Jason, you got the last word, and I'm going to get off the stage here. Thank you so much for coming on Champions on the Dot. And I'm looking forward to locking arms with you to help this organization grow and help so many college players, past, present, and future.
Well, God bless you, Mike. I mean, you and I mean, I think the really unbelievably rewarding part of my job is I get to talk to so many people that I would never have met. And we're talking hundreds. We're probably over 1,000 at this point in terms of thinking about new people I've encountered from this project of building the College Football Players Association. And you're one of those people, Mike. I feel like you've become a good friend. And, I really very grateful you invited me on today. And yeah, I think just that last shot, I do think I've said many times here over the past month and a half that, boy, it sure feels like 2024 is going to be our breakthrough year. And we have things going on behind the scenes that we're not ready to talk about yet, but then also these sort of things that are not under our control, the Dartmouth men's basketball situation, other things that, boy, it really feels like things are aligning, right? And for our success. And so if you're listening to this and, this sounds like something you want to get involved in, boy, this is, whether you're past, present, or future player, or whether you're just a member of the general public who wants to get involved, really would want you to head over our website and just start taking a look around, seeing how you can help. We're going to be contacting basically everyone who has reached out over the past, 3 years and saying, hey, we're going to have some big things coming this year, and, watch out for it and get involved when you can. And so the best way to do that is get involved in whatever way you want to before the news hits, because once it hits, we're kind of off into the whirlwind. And so, yeah, just love, anybody who wants to get involved, just head on over to the website, cfbpa.org.